Today, we are doing a deep dive into a stack of recent reports and official statements about frankly, dramatic military action, Operation Southern Spear.
And we really need to get into this because the U.S. response to the drug crisis has fundamentally shifted. We've moved from policing and interdiction to actual kinetic military strikes.
That shift is huge, and it's all anchored in this belief that America is facing a clear and present danger.
Exactly. We have source material here citing President Trump's declaration that we don't want drugs killing our people. And, the numbers, they really back up the gravity of the problem. Drug overdose deaths were estimated around 80,000 in 2024.
It's a devastating statistic, and we should note some U.S. officials have put that number even higher.
Much higher, citing figures closer to 300,000 when you factor in all the related violence and, long-term health consequences.
So whether it's 80,000 or 300,000, the administration's framing is clear. This isn't a public health issue anymore. It's a sustained assault on the American people.
And that framing is everything. It's what allows the administration to designate this situation not as a police operation, but as a non-international armed conflict, NIAC.
Okay, let's unpack that immediately. Operation Southern Spear. That's the name for this swift, lethal military response. And it treats drug smugglers, especially the ones moving fentanyl and cocaine, not as criminals, but as narco-terrorists.
Right. Operating in what's now defined as a war zone. The mission, which really got going by September 2025, involves the U.S. Navy and air assets launching kinetic strikes.
We're talking missiles, bombs.
Missiles and bombs, yes.
Right.
Launched against vessels they even just suspect of drug trafficking. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth basically stated the justification up front, saying the U.S. has absolute and complete authority to do this to defend the American people.
So that's the core question we have to get into. Why missiles instead of marshals? What is the legal switch that was flipped that allows the U.S. military to destroy boats and kill people without, a trial?
It all comes down to this formal fusion of the war on drugs with the war on terror. The administration designated key cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs.
And the main targets are?
Primarily the Venezuelan crime syndicate Tren de Aragua, and more importantly, the Venezuelan government-linked group, the Cartel de los Soles.
So explain that FTO designation. Why is it so critical? How does calling a drug cartel a terrorist group suddenly change the rules of engagement?
It's the ultimate legal pivot. Once the Cartel de los Soles is labeled an FTO, the whole framework shifts from domestic law enforcement.
Where you arrest people, due process, all of that.
Right. It shifts from that to the laws of armed conflict. And this allows the U.S. to label their operatives as unlawful combatants.
And if you're an unlawful combatant in a declared conflict against the United States, you become a legitimate military target.
You become a legitimate military target. The U.S. is basically saying, you are not a criminal anymore. You are an enemy fighter in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific.
Yeah.
That's the battle space.
So the argument they're making is that because these groups are trafficking fentanyl and linked to a hostile state actor, Venezuela, they can be treated as a military threat.
That's the justification, yes. The U.S. alleges that groups like Cartel de los Soles are not just smuggling. They're a hub for cocaine transport with direct links to the Nicolas Maduro regime.
And we saw that decisive stance immediately. We have that quote from Secretary of State Marco Rubio right after the first strike.
Yes. He was very clear. He said, instead of interdicting it on the president's orders, we blew it up, and it'll happen again.
We blew it up. That quote says it all. It's the end of a decades-long policy. This is about total elimination of the threat.
Exactly.
So let's move from the legal side to what's actually happening on the water. The hard data from this campaign is pretty remarkable. This is not some limited engagement.
Not at all. It has been relentless since September 2025. As of mid-December, U.S. forces had already executed at least 26 kinetic strikes.
26? And how many vessels?
27 vessels targeted, resulting in at least 99 people killed. And the theater of operations, it's expanded so quickly. It started in the Caribbean near Venezuela, but it's now stretched all the way into the Eastern Pacific.
And when you say military assets, we're not talking about Coast Guard cutters here.
No, absolutely not. We're talking high precision, very high cost weaponry being used to hunt down, speedboats and even submarines.
They're narco-submarines.
Right. These highly sophisticated, low-profile vessels that are just incredibly difficult to track. The tools they're using include MQ-9 Reaper drones and advanced munitions, Specifically, we're seeing a lot of Hellfire missiles.
And those are not cheap.
Not cheap at all. Each one costs somewhere between $150,000 and $220,000. It really highlights the strategy of using overwhelming high-precision force.
And that kind of force has apparently paid some dividends, not just in the strikes, but in getting regional allies on board.
Well, the cooperation with the Dominican Republic, the DR, that's often cited as a major success story. After one strike in September, the Dominican Navy went in and was able to salvage 377 packages of cocaine. It amounted to 1,000 kilograms.
1,000 kilos. So that's over 2,000 pounds.
Over 2,200 pounds. And the Dominican authorities, they publicly validated the whole approach, calling it the first time in history that the United States and the Dominican Republic carry out a joint operation against narco-terrorism in the Caribbean.
That kind of operation, though, it requires a massive investment. And to show just how serious the U.S. commitment is, they sent the USS Gerald R. carrier strike group.
It's a phenomenal scale of commitment, the most advanced, powerful naval asset in the world.
Just sitting in the Caribbean?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The fleet itself cost over $40 billion to buy. And just to operate the carrier, you're looking at about $8 million a day.
A day. Wow.
So deploying a carrier strike group sends this undeniable signal that the U.S. sees this as a major power projection. It's not just border security.
It's about winning a conflict.
It is.
And while the public face of all this is counter-narcotics, our sources suggest there's a much broader geopolitical game being played.
Oh, absolutely. The tactical strikes are meant to achieve a strategic goal that is much bigger than just stopping drugs. It's designed to apply existential political and economic pressure.
And we have a quote that sort of spells that out, right?
We do. The White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, reportedly framed the strategy very bluntly. The mission is to, quote, keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle.
Until Maduro cries uncle. That is incredibly revealing. It crystallizes the real objective.
It does. It's about using military force to collapse the financial arteries of the Venezuelan Maduro regime, which they believe relies on the Cartel de los Soles for its revenue. The operation is aimed squarely at that nexus between the drug gangs and the Venezuelan state.
And some analysts are even calling this a Monroe Doctrine 2.0, a reassertion of U.S. dominance in the hemisphere.
That's the term being used, yes. But let's talk about the cost of that. Critics have pointed out what they call the awful arithmetic of this campaign.
The math is pretty stark, isn't it?
It is. One analysis pointed out that the cost of just deploying that naval fleet is at least 5 times what the Cartel de los Soles even makes in smuggling.
5 times their entire profit margin.
At least. And then you look at the munitions. A $200,000 Hellfire missile being used to take out a boat. Well, that missile can cost up to 300 times more than the salary paid to the crewmen who were killed.
So, on paper, it sounds incredibly inefficient if your only goal is stopping drugs. So why accept that kind of cost disparity?
Because the administration's defense is that that calculation misses the entire strategic point.
Okay.
When you're dealing with what you've defined as a state-backed criminal enterprise threatening the homeland with, essentially, chemical weapons,
Yeah.
fentanyl, the goal isn't financial efficiency. The goal is deterrence, disruption, and decisive victory.
So the massive cost is part of the message.
It is the message. It's a deliberate, massive expenditure to signal zero tolerance for this kind of aggression and to ensure the safety of our citizens.
A message that seems to resonate with a lot of Americans. But we do have to cover the strong criticisms of this operation, especially from international legal experts.
And that legal condemnation has been fierce. International law experts, humanitarian groups, they have repeatedly condemned these strikes as extrajudicial executions.
Or just murder.
Or outright murder, yes. Their core argument is that the U.S. is not in a legally recognized armed conflict with Venezuela. Therefore, the people being targeted, even if they were drug traffickers, are still legally civilians under international law.
And the main point of contention is due process, right?
Yeah, exactly. Critics point out these targets posed no imminent threat to U.S. forces. They weren't given a chance to surrender to be arrested. Colombia's President Petro, for instance, publicly called the attacks murder. It's a view that focuses squarely on traditional rules of engagement.
So it's a fundamental disagreement over American power. And the administration's supporters, they counter this by framing it as a choice.
A choice between prioritizing the legal status of foreign actors over the safety of the American homeland. That political framing is what galvanized public support. Senator Bernie Moreno was very direct about it.
What did he say?
He said what's really despicable is defending foreign terrorist drug traffickers who are directly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. It just highlights that huge gap between humanitarian law and what's seen as a national security necessity.
And looking at public opinion, the administration's approach seems to have really broad support.
It really does. A Harvard-Capps-Harris poll from early October found that 71% of American respondents supported the U.S. destroying boats trafficking drugs from South America.
71%. That's a strong mandate for this level of action against people poisoning our communities.
It is. It suggests the public widely accepts the necessity of this kind of force when they're confronted with what they see as a lethal cross-border threat.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for the future? Operation Southern Spear has, without a doubt, violently disrupted these narco-terrorist networks. It's delivered a huge blow to the Cartel de los Soles and put the Maduro regime on notice. It's a new, muscular form of military engagement.
It is. And by legally designating this a non-international armed conflict and labeling the operatives unlawful combatants, the administration successfully carved out the authority to eliminate a perceived danger with lethal force. And this whole operation, it really forces us to consider a fundamental question that could redefine national self-defense.
Which is?
If traditional methods failed for decades to stop this drug epidemic, how far should a president go and how much expense should we accept to eliminate these deadly threats before they ever reach our borders? We are watching a new definition of threat elimination being put into practice right now.